This is the story of a fraudster in one of our most high-profile white-collar crimes. A woman who was allowed to hold down top jobs in the public service despite being a serial con artist. Eventually, she got caught stealing a massive amount of public money. But there's so much more to it. As part of a stuffed circuit investigation, we went to court so we could finally reveal her intriguing backstory, her criminal history, and how she managed to keep it secret. She would eventually cost the job of one of the country's top officials, forced to resign, the way he puts it, with a gun held to his head.
Door closing.
Let's talk about Joanne Harrison. Actually, what's your reaction when you even hear that name now?
I feel angry. The effect that person has had on my life and that of my family is almost beyond kind of explanation. So I feel angry about when I hear that name.
She went to prison. Your life is carried on. Why do you need to clear your name?
Well, I was the person who brought her to justice.
The former Ministry of Transport manager has...
She went to prison because I did the right thing. Somehow, I think Heather, my wife, and I have ended up paying a much bigger price than the criminal for doing the right thing.
I can actually see her office.
Can you?
Yep.
From here?
Yep.
Do you ever look at it and think back to those days?
I don't really care about Joanne Sharp. I couldn't care less. I'm not talking to you because I care about Joanne Sharp. I'm talking actually because I care about our justice system and how it's let so many people down.
Once a senior manager at the Ministry of Transport, Joanne Harrison being forced to swap an office for a jail cell.
She was born Joanne Sidebottom. She became Joanne Sharp for a while, then Joanne Harrison. Whatever name she went by, though, she had a way of making people never forget her.
She was friendly, she was bubbly. I remember that she, helped me clear the table one day. And of course I look back now knowing that, she's a Jekyll and Hyde. And the other side of her personality is somebody who went to work every day and lied and cheated and manipulated the people she worked with.
I would describe her as a sociopath. This is a person who has no conscience, a person who, for most of us, it's almost impossible to understand what makes her tick. She's so different to the rest of us. It's how I view her now.
You'll probably remember Joanne Harrison ripped off the Ministry of Transport for more than $700,000 and was convicted in 2017. But that wasn't her first offence. We discovered that before she got her high-powered, high-paid job at the ministry, she'd already been found guilty of another crime, another outrageous fraud. How'd that happen? Well, that previous crime was kept secret by the courts, her name suppressed, the judge saying he wanted to protect her family and he was sure she'd never do anything like it again. So we decided to go to court to get that name suppression lifted so we could connect those frauds together, meaning Martin Matthews can speak freely and fully for the first time.
So much of what played out back in 2017 was difficult for me because there were aspects of what happened that I just simply wasn't legally allowed to talk about. The reality is that if she had not had that name suppression, she would not have been able to change her identity and hide her past with the ease that she was able to. The likelihood of her being able to secure employment with the ministry hiding her past would have been very low. I feel quite aggrieved about the fact that, much of what Heather, my wife, and I have experienced over the last 2 years is in part because the courts gave her essentially the camouflage, the cover, to be able to reoffend. And we are the victims, along with the taxpayer of that.
The judge at the time said the possibility of reoffending was in no way on any kind of cards.
He did, and I guess that is yet another illustration of how cunning and sophisticated this fraudster is. She managed to con a judge into giving her name suppression.
Cunning and sophisticated is right, and this is how she did it. Harrison arrived at the Ministry of Transport in 2011 after impressing a recruitment agency and a 3-person selection panel. She quickly moved up the ranks and pay scales, getting glowing performance reviews, but quietly, she was starting to play the system. Running an elaborate false invoicing scam involving fake vendors, businesses that didn't exist, even helping secure her husband 3 paid roles without ever declaring a conflict of interest. On several occasions, concerns were raised not about fraud but about compliance issues, that she wasn't strictly following procedures, but each time she answered away the questions. You're a dates man, aren't you? You reel dates off.
Well, I am when it comes to this issue because I've lived and breathed it for the last 3 years.
Let me run a date by you. 11th of April, 2016.
Yeah, a date that changed my life.
Because it was the day Martin Matthews received a message through LinkedIn, someone asking him to make contact.
I rang them that day, and that person said to me, was I aware that I had a senior manager on my team by the name of Joanne Harrison that used to go by a different name, Joanne Sharp. And not only that, did I know that she had been convicted of fraud as a senior executive for Tower Corporation, but then given permanent name suppression. It was one of those moments where I think I almost fell off my seat. I knew none of that. And I didn't even know at that point whether what I was being told was true or if it related to the person I knew as Joanne Harrison.
Her file must have been checked to see what had happened when she was recruited. What did that check discover?
So that check was made on the day I got the tip off, and that showed that all of the details from her recruitment had been removed from the file. And you need to remember that when she was recruited, her job was to be the HR manager, so she had access to all that file.
And you presume that it was she who deleted that information or removed that information?
Clearly, I've made that assumption, yeah.
What about her CV?
So her CV wasn't on the file, but actually what we did was an electronic search of ministry files, and we were able to uncover the CV she had submitted for the job in 2011. And we also actually discovered that she'd submitted a job application back in 2008, and we had a CV from that time as well.
Did they match up?
No, they didn't, and that was a key piece of information that caused us to again think that we were dealing with someone who was hadn't been entirely truthful with us.
Investigations were launched and it got serious. The locks on her office door replaced, her computer hard drive copied, documents removed from her office, covert cameras set up.
Over the course of that weekend, the camera surveillance picked up the cleaner, who was obviously not in the office doing cleaning, trying to access Joanne Harrison's office. She made several attempts to get in, but because the locks had been changed, she couldn't do that.
What was she trying to do?
So the subsequent inquiries by my investigators involved interviews of this person who revealed that Joanne Harrison had asked her to come into the ministry to get material, and it's apparent that Joanne Harrison had been grooming this person for some time with kindness and gifts, so that obviously she would be willing to do something for her if she ever needed it.
It just unfolded in an unbelievable way. It was almost quite gripping because it was so bizarre. And of course, as more and more unfolded, everything that she'd done in the past, we started looking at in a different light.
May 16 was a critical date because that is the day when we actually discovered the fraud, and that was uncovered when my investigators interviewed a person that we had tracked down through the invoices, and that person spilt the beans. That person explained how the fraud had been committed. That person showed that from the day that I initiated the inquiries, Joanne Harrison had been communicating with that person to destroy records and to essentially make sure that any trail would be covered up.
And boom, you've got the evidence you need.
We've got the evidence. We had everything that we needed at that point to show that she had committed a really significant fraud against the taxpayer. And that was the day that I instructed the matter be formally referred to the Serious Fraud Office.
And boy, did you have a fraud. When you, at whatever point, heard that the figure was, what was it, $726,000? What did you think?
Well, of course, it's not only mind-blowing. In my case, I just, I felt distraught by that.
So who is this person who'd committed fraud on such a massive scale? Joanne Harrison, aka Joanne Sharp. And what was her criminal past? Well, now, with her name suppression lifted, we can tell you how, as head of HR, she carried out a massive fraud against one of New Zealand's biggest companies, Tower Corporation, before the Ministry of Transport had ever heard of her. When you saw the reporting on the fraud committed against the Ministry of Transport, did you recognise the woman in the photo?
Oh, yeah.
She was Joanne Harrison by then, though.
Yeah, she was Joanne. There was Joanne Sharp, of course. And Joanne Sharp, I recognised her completely. My phone melted too, all the people ringing me.
What did you think then, when you saw she had done exactly what you predicted would happen?
Felt really let down by the legal system, by the fact that I'd been gagged all these years as essentially a victim of hers from speaking out. And in fact, even when I heard about what she'd done at the Ministry of Transport, I couldn't go public.
It's farcical, isn't it?
It's absolutely farcical, and, exactly what the judge said wouldn't happen, happened.
When you saw the publicity about the Ministry of Transport fraudster,
Yes.
Did you recognise Joanne Harrison as the
Yes.
Joanne Sharp that you knew?
Yep.
What did you think?
That's what fraudsters do. I mean, so there's no surprises to me.
$726,000.
Yeah, nice. Good take. But that's her MO. And they just keep going.
Why are you speaking out about this? It's not your natural kind of, inclination to want to speak publicly. But why are you, Deb?
I just feel the people that have interacted with Joanne and in some ways become victims. She is so believable, and what she does is wrong.
I would describe Joan as charming. She is very, very competent. She's friendly, she's nice, she's slick. And like all good fraudsters, she's got a great MO, great method of operation. And I can guarantee you this, that wasn't the first time that Joanne Sharp, in my respectful view, had committed fraud.
Yeah, she was a very bright, bubbly person. She inspired confidence, very friendly, motivated, positive. But really, I suppose, in summary, I'd probably describe her as a very charming narcissist.
A manipulative, quite a charismatic woman with absolutely no morals.
Well, evidently so, but she also had clever ways of getting people to trust her.
She had a policeman's hat on her filing cabinet, and I know she'd come from the UK, so we got talking a little bit about that, and she explained that she was working with sort of the down and out or disaffected youth, how rough the streets were there, but she loved her role because she felt she was able to sort of help people in that role, and somebody had to do that work, so she did.
Did you infer from that she had been a police officer?
Yes, I did. Yes. It was certainly the impression I got that she was.
And in her office, on the above the filing cabinet, she had one of those old bobbies, her police helmet, sitting on the cabinet like an old. I remember sticking it on one day and walking around the office in it, sort of just having a joke.
We checked with the police in the UK, and for privacy reasons, they wouldn't confirm or deny she'd ever worked for them.
Well, I know now that she had nothing to do with the police, but I know that was part of the prop. And fraudsters use props, and that was just part of her prop. And it had me and others fooled for a moment.
She also had a story that she told you about her husband, Patrick Sharp.
Yes.
What was that?
Well, she said that Patrick was involved in doing sea rescues. So on the weekends he used to go away and work on the sea rescue boat. Something similar to our Coast Guard, I gather, but that was my impression. And I thought, wow, it's a pretty good couple, really, aren't they?
She provided with great detail and a very great overview, if you like, of Patrick's experience as a top policeman with a whole lot of qualities. I didn't realise her husband was a policeman at the time. In fact, she told me he was a detective and had vast experience.
She used her position to appoint her husband as an investigator in the company, and that's actually what led to the big punch-up in the beginning of the end for her, I suspect.
Tell me about that. What happened?
Once she had ingratiated herself with me, including me cooking her sausages on my barbecue and letting her use my beach house, she then very subtly put pressure on me to see if I could get her husband a job working for Advanced Consulting.
Mike Keeney's company, Advanced Consulting, had the contract to do investigations work for Tower.
I can't remember the details, but I suspect I spoke to Mike Keeney and said, hey, look, Patrick's looking for a job. Do you want to talk to him?
I felt almost coerced, ultimately, to hire him. I didn't want to. I felt uneasy. But, of course, Joanne she had the bucket and the tap. She controlled my workflow.
Right.
And essentially,
she could remove that contract from you if she wanted to, so you felt obliged to take on her husband.
Absolutely. I felt quite pressured, but uneasy. And so eventually I did hire her husband, Patrick.
If that sounds familiar, it's because, remember, she would go on to get her husband work at the ministry and other public service jobs. What was he like?
Patrick was hopeless.
Yeah, just a weak, snivelling kind of pen pusher, really. They were a very strange match, to be honest.
He was absolutely incompetent.
And then, next minute, I hear that he's been appointed as the internal investigator for Tower Insurance. And then the penny dropped for me, and I thought, I've been had. I've been conned.
And then Patrick said to me, he said, we're not going to renew your contract.
How much of your business was that Tower contract?
Oh, that would have been good, at that time, 70% of our work.
So ultimately, you felt pressured by Joanne Sharp to take on her husband, which
Absolutely.
you did under duress, essentially.
Absolutely.
And he did you out of a huge contract.
Yes, ultimately. To be fair, if I'd have followed my gut feeling and instincts right up front, I should never have hired Patrick Sharp.
I fronted her and said, Joanne, you can't give your husband a job. There's systems that have to be followed. There's processes that have to be followed, like any responsible corporate entity. And you can't give your husband a job. She just told me to go to hell. And I then went to the group auditor. And I told him what had happened, and all I know is that within a week, Patrick was gone,
What did that do to your relationship with Joanne Sharp?
She then embarked on months and months, if not years, of just persecuting me, absolutely attacking me personally at every angle she possibly could. She launched an investigation, an internal investigation, attempting to find some dirt on me and Mike Keeney.
What was the premise for the investigation?
There was no doubt she wanted to get rid of myself and Andrew because we were definitely in the way.
They set up an office, I understand it was around the Britomart somewhere, and they spent many months, from memory, trawling through documents, trying to find evidence that Mike was paying me a kickback. And
They
of course,
find it?
well, you can't find something if it doesn't exist. But I'd have to say it was, I was worried at the time. I thought maybe they would fabricate something.
What did you do in response?
Okay, we staked out various places and we tried to determine what they were doing and particularly what Joanne was doing, who she was meeting with, etc.
You were spying on her?
Yes, I was.
While she was spying on you?
Yes, I was.
Gosh, it's all very Machiavellian, isn't it? It's nasty stuff.
Yeah, well, anyone who knows me knows that I don't like people who try and take the piss, and she tried to take the piss.
So Sharp was launching investigations into those who crossed her and removing those who were a threat. Maybe it distracted her because she started to give away just little signs.
I was down in the car park of Tower Insurance one day and Joanne drove in, nearly ran me over, I think, in a flash, I think it was a Range Rover. I knew then, I knew immediately, every part of my being knew there was something really wrong here.
And then she got really sloppy without considering coming up against a vigilant executive assistant.
I had received a call from a contractor that worked for us from time to time, and just on a totally random matter, got talking as you do, and I said, "Oh, it's a shame that I missed you when you were in Auckland recently. It would have been nice to say hi, just in a friendly way." And he said, "Oh, I haven't been in Auckland for months."
It'll come as no surprise to learn that Joanne Sharp had claimed the contractor was in Auckland that week, and she'd lodged an expense claim for his hotel bill. So Deb Ashley went to the hotel and discovered the bill wasn't for that contractor at all. It was for what the hotel described as an older couple. With the surname Harrison.
Yes.
She was,
said
of course, by that stage, Joanne Sharp.
She was Joanne Sharp, that's what I knew her as, and had said that her maiden name was Harrison.
The older couple were family of hers. She was putting them up for a few days while they visited her in Auckland, except she wasn't paying for it. Tower was. And as ever, it's the little things with fraudsters that become their undoing.
It is. They get greedy, and it's the small things that tip them over. But with Joanne, she had this air about her that she was just smarter than anyone else.
But she wasn't, and once Deb Ashley's initial hunch was confirmed, Tower launched an investigation and then went to the police. And now, having lifted the name suppression, we can document what Harrison actually did to defraud Tower and why that fraud matters. According to the documents, her crimes began when she'd been at Tower for less than a year. Processing a bonus payment she said was for another staff member, then getting it paid into her own account. The investigation uncovered invoice frauds, that fake hotel expense claim, and buying personal items with company money. In all, she faced 5 fraud charges, 3 of them representative of many more counts of fraud. So while the amount was officially $110,000, we understand the true figure was hundreds of thousands. I just want to zero in on one particular fraud that she committed against Tower,
Yes.
which was when a new CEO started. She went into her own personnel file, removed the 3rd page of her contract, put in a new one that said there was a $35,000 relocation fee, and went to the new CEO and said, "I haven't been paid this," and got paid it.
Yes.
What do you think of that MO?
Well, I think it's consistent with Joanne's sheer dishonesty, and using and fiddling with documents is a great MO for fraudsters, of course.
It takes a lot of guts to do that, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, to go into your...
She's very confident. I mean, so she was hugely confident. I don't think she was worried about being caught.
Sharp paid back the $110,000 and pleaded guilty to the Tower frauds. The Crown said the starting point for sentencing should be up to 3.5 years prison. Did you go to court when she was prosecuted?
Yes, I did.
What was she like in court?
Just appeared very genuine, very remorseful.
Joanne Sharp said in court that she didn't know why she did it and that it felt like it wasn't her who did it. Does that make any sense to you?
My cynical side would say often offenders think the best way to deal with something is to say, I don't know why. Because actually, to get back to fixing it, you do have to go deep inside yourself. It's painful. And so therefore it's easier to say, I don't know why.
The defence argued she shouldn't go to prison, and the judge agreed, sentencing her to 300 hours community service. What did you think of that sentence?
Oh, it's just a sick joke, you know. I mean, let's not get too philosophical here, but you see people who go to jail for much less than that in terms of theft. So I thought it was just crazy.
And it was about to get worse, because soon after there was another hearing about name suppression. The Crown opposed it, but her defence said publishing her name would be an intolerable impact on her then 14-year-old son. The judge accepted that and granted permanent name suppression, sure that Sharp's crimes were a one-off. In giving her permanent name suppression, the judge said, and I quote, "In my judgment, the possibility of reoffending is in no way on any kind of cards."
Was it ashes in the mouth? He'd been lied to. He was fed a line. You know, it's actually the system that's broken. I think that he was wrong to give her name suppression, but that's a personal view of mine, that where you are involved in a massive theft as a servant, I question whether a judge should be able to form a conclusion that she's never going to reoffend based upon nothing more than a half-hour speech from a lawyer.
There were also probation and psychiatrist reports, but ultimately Joanne Sharp had got what she wanted: freedom with her identity kept secret.
And the judge retired and went and left the court, and I remember her scurrying out the court, and I can still remember it. She walked out of the court and her lawyer headed off down the stairwell.
As soon as she got in the stairwell, which was well lit, she just smiled and went like that.
Really?
Total contrast to what the demeanour and presentation she had in court.
She didn't look too demure when she was heading down the stairs.
Very pleased with herself, was she?
Very pleased with herself. And if I was a lawyer, I'd be bloody pleased with myself too. The lawyer did a great job.
What did that say to you?
It was an act. It was an absolute act.
The act began before Joanne Sharp even got to New Zealand. We now know the information on her visa application was false. We know now that she lied on her visa application for New Zealand, so her dishonesty goes, right back. What does that tell us?
So her first option obviously was to lie, but one of the things that humans don't seem to understand is that liars come across more credibly than people that are trying to tell the truth. And the reason for that is if you don't have to check what you're saying, then you deliver it more like an actor or an actress, and you can actually deliver very clearly. I watch people and I think, people think that person's telling the truth. It's really easy to tell a good story if you don't have to think about the facts and start to recall what's going on. Often the person who hesitates is the one you should be believing.
So Joanne Sharp gets into New Zealand assisted by her lies and lands the job at Tower.
Hello, Peter speaking.
Oh, hi Peter. It's Paula Penfold calling from Stuff in Auckland. How are you?
Yeah, good, Paula.
The man who employed her there, former CEO Peter Lindhout, is now in Australia. I'm just really trying to get as many perspectives as possible about who she is and how she came to get away with what she did for such a long time.
Yeah, look, Paula, I have no comment.
Why are you reluctant, though? It's kind of intriguing to me that she's so, she's this person who has caused a lot of damage along the way. I mean, is that one of the reasons why you are reluctant to or resistant to talking?
No, look, Paula, I've just got no comment.
Right, okay. I mean, the point is obviously that, she was, this was her first job in New Zealand and it was you who employed her, right? And so that was the beginning of a kind of path of destruction that went through very many companies and government organisations with lots of people who were damaged in the process and hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen. So, why no comment at all?
I just have no comment.
All right, Peter, thank you for your time anyway. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Paula.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, no comment, said 4 times. That's it.
I believe Mr. Lindau probably regrets his association with Joanne Sharp. I believe he was led by the nose. That's my view.
So then what? Obviously, having stolen so much money from them, she lost her job at Tower. And in spite of her conviction, gets a job immediately at the Far North District Council. Council sources describe how Joanne Sharp would spend hours away from the office, how she'd say she was attending conferences or training courses, but she wasn't. There was even apparently a failed attempt to get her husband a job. We've asked the council for documents about Joanne Sharp, including her CV, but the council refused. There are definitely questions which should be answered though, because we've been told council was warned it had hired a fraudster.
We found out that she had got this job in the Far North District Council. I remember thinking, my God, she must think she's died and gone to heaven, And so Mike Kenny made a phone call to the Far North District Council and spoke to the CEO and said, mate, this woman you got working for you, she's a thief. You need to do something about it. You can't employ this woman. She's an absolute thief. She's just been sacked from Tower.
I advised them, or asked them, to determine whether they were about to hire a woman who had previously worked for an insurance company downtown Auckland, and if her first name was Joanne, I advised him strongly to vigorously to do some background checks and inquiries.
Hi Clive, it's Paula Penfold calling from Stuff. Hi, Paula. How are you? Clive Manley was the CEO of the Far North District Council at the time. And obviously in the case of the Far North District Council, we're not clear yet on exactly what she did do there because that hasn't become public. So why, if it was warned, did the council take her on? We could come to Taumaranui. He agrees to an interview to talk to us about how he came to employ Joanne Sharp as Human Resources Manager, because he says there are lessons to be learned. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Clive. I look forward to meeting you.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
I defy anyone who could say, I knew Joanne was a crook. I met her and I knew it. The people I speak to, they did not believe that.
Do you recall her CV by any chance? It's a while ago, but do you remember her CV?
It was 12 years ago. I do remember the CV, and it was a very impressive CV. She really had the experience we were looking for, and we were very pleased that we recruited her based on the experience she brought.
Did she include Tower on her CV?
Tower I was aware of, and we had references from them, and we spoke to people.
At Tower?
Yep.
And what did they say?
In hindsight, after we followed through, they were handpicked by her, and we shouldn't have relied on that information.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that she appears to have coached people to say things about her and a working relationship, which we relied on as a reference from them.
So her application was dodgy, but what about that warning? Clive Manley's recollection of how he found out about Joanne Sharp's history differs from other accounts we've had, but he confirms he did receive a call, though he says it came when Sharp had already been working for him for a few months. What did you do with that information?
I obviously brought in Joanne and I laid out, I've just been given this information. Has she got an explanation of why I would have had that phone call?
And did she?
She did try and use the fact that her convictions were purely technical, they weren't real convictions, and that was why it had been suppressed, because it was just, it was other people they were really after, but they had to convict her because she was part of it. And
that's what she said.
This is what she said. She's very good at telling you what she thinks you might want to hear.
Did you believe that?
No. And also she then said, you're not going to destroy my chance of a future life. I've served my the court has dealt with it. They were satisfied that it's dealt with. I deserve another chance.
And Clive Manley gave her another chance. He didn't sack her. He gave her time to find another job. But she just then kind of stayed. Clive Manley himself left, a new CEO stepped in, and Sharp was gone. Are you aware of the circumstances of her leaving?
All I know is that she left under mutual agreement. I'm told she wasn't fired. There was no question of that she'd done wrong.
He disputes the allegations that she attempted to hire her husband for a role and is sure the Far North District Council was not defrauded by Joanne Sharp.
Good luck, good fortune, good whatever you want to call it, we appear to have escaped her pattern.
We can't test that ourselves because remember the council has refused to tell us about Joanne Sharp. We do know what happened next though, which is that after leaving the council in 2008, she goes to Australia and lands a top role with a Victorian state-owned water company. She left Goulburn Murray Water in 2010 under a cloud, and you guessed it, the Victorian police were called in to launch a fraud investigation. From what sources have told us, it was a familiar MO, fake invoices, non-existent businesses. But the water company ignored our attempts to ask questions about her. There are just so many people who don't want to talk about Joanne Sharp, Joanne Harrison. Which brings us to 2011 when she applies for that job at the Ministry of Transport. And all those gaps in her history means no red flags are raised. What was on Joanne Harrison's CV, by the way, about her time in Australia?
So the interesting thing about her CV is, firstly, it does not reveal anything about her time with Tower Corporation or indeed the Far North District Council. It says that she was travelling in the US, Australia and New Zealand in that period.
Her CV does reference HSBC in London, but did she work there? And if so, in what role? Well, it's hard to say because HSBC refuses to disclose anything about her.
I wouldn't accept for 1 minute at face value that she had a job at HSBC or the job that she said that she had.
You don't believe anything she says?
I wouldn't believe a thing. The lady couldn't lie straight in bed.
It does seem that way, but she gets the job at the Ministry of Transport and gets to work, though not in the way she should have. Have you come across many fraudsters in your professional career?
Yeah. I'm an insurance lawyer. I spent the first 15 years of my life basically locking people like her up.
How does she compare?
She's pretty useless, to be honest. She wasn't very good at what she did. That's why she keeps getting caught. But she was very, really manipulative. Really manipulative. But the details of how she got caught in that, she's pretty stupid. She wasn't that smart, but just brazen, I guess. Yeah.
Although some people describe her as being very smart.
Oh, I'm sure she's got an intellect there somewhere, and she's smart enough. I mean, goodness me. There's a lot of smart, evil people, but I don't think she was very good at stealing.
How do you now reconcile the person you found out that she became, the fraudster with this extensive criminal past, with the woman who was helping you clear the table?
I don't know. I don't know how somebody can do that. I think most people go to work to do a good job, and people live their lives honestly and fairly and with respect for other people. I don't know how she can have gone to work every day and lived a lie.
Joanne Sidebottom, Joanne Sharp, Joanne Harrison did her time in prison, and now she's been deported back to the UK where she was born. We want to speak to her to see if she'll tell her side of the story, why she did what she did. We start with a number for her parents.
Hello.
Hello.
Who's speaking?
Hello. My name is Paula Penfold. I'm calling from Auckland in New Zealand. I'm a journalist at Stuff, which is a news organisation in New Zealand. And I just wanted to... He's hung up. Didn't get far, did we? We also email her, send her a letter via her parents, another through her lawyer, and contact her son. All to no avail. Seems she doesn't want to talk. Which is interesting because she's not leaving any footprint, at least under the names we know of. We try finding addresses or other records for her in the UK without success. So Joanne Harrison's new life is a bit of a mystery.
As sure as God made little apples, she will have reinvented herself and she'll be ripping someone off in England as we speak. The woman should be in jail.
Do you have anything to say to Joanne Sharp, Joanne Harrison now?
I'd probably say, "G'day, Joanne. How's life treating you?" That's what I'd say to her. "How's the last few years been for you, Joanne? I've had a great time."
At first, things turned out pretty great for Martin Matthews too. In the wake of the MOT fraud case, he got the job he'd wanted his entire career, Auditor General. You barely got your feet under the desk, didn't you?
I did.
Martin Matthews fell on his sword yesterday after a parliamentary inquiry found it was untenable for him to stay in the role.
Because the political storm which erupted around the fraud meant Matthews made the ultimate career sacrifice, forced, he says, to resign. And he's angry.
They, in effect, held a gun to my head.
The Auditor General standing down as the fallout continues over the handling of con artist Joanne Harrison.
The forced resignation, as he calls it, is why Martin Matthews says he's paid a bigger price than the criminal, and why the impact on him has been far greater, far more serious than anyone knew.
I have been effectively unemployable for the last 2 years. I am what some people frequently describe as toxic or too radioactive. They don't want to touch me for fear of either how the media or politicians might respond if they were associated with me. We've had to cash up our retirement savings. We've had to sell our family home. The consequences for us have been very significant. The sense of hurt, of humiliation, the grief, the damage done to us by what they did is immeasurable.
One of the reasons that I'm speaking to you today is because someone with integrity, someone who has had a very good career in the public service in New Zealand, and someone who took the right actions and took the risk, ended up having all of his commitment to New Zealand and his personal life severely damaged because somebody else did something wrong. And I am very much against what I call collateral damage. And he's collateral damage, and he's been more punished than the offender.
This has been a very trying time for us because our lives have basically been ruined. It's been devastating for us and our family.
You lost your family home, you said. Where are you living now then?
We're living in a one-bedroom flat.
Really? What would you say to Joanne Harrison now?
Well, ultimately, she's responsible for all of this. She's been paroled and deported back to the UK. I'm in no doubt she'll reinvent herself, take on a new identity, and probably do this to someone else.